In this video, we're going to take a look at how to work with Bitmap2Material 3. So we're going to start here in Substance Player, and I already have Bitmap2Material loaded. And so the first thing we need to do is go ahead and supply our main input. So I have an image here. I'm just going to drag and drop this right here into my input, and then I get a pop-up that allows me to pick my input tweak. So I'm going to go ahead and just select this option. And so what's happened now is Bitmap2Material has gone ahead and derived all of the maps from that single source image. So for instance, here in my view you can see that, well, we have our base color. Over here we have our height. If I just click through a couple of these channels, you can see that we have our normal map as well. Again, here's our height that we're going to be focusing on here for this very first section. So we've got our base color, we have our height, and we're ready to get started. So here underneath Bitmap2Material, this is our parameters. I'm going to come down to the bottom and click the outputs here. And let's just kind of scroll down and take a look at what we have. So we have several different outputs that we can work with. Now, Bitmap2Material 3's main focus is going to be on not only just being able to create full materials, but we're also looking at being able to create physically based content, or PBR maps. So here you can see under our outputs we have the ability for base color, diffuse. We also have gloss, rough, metal, our ambient occlusion, and so on. And so what's important to note is that Bitmap2Material will work with both metal rough workflow as well as spec gloss. So in this case, I'm going to be working with metal rough. So you notice that I have my base color enabled. I have my normal. Here I have my roughness. In this case of this being a rock, we definitely don't need metal, so I'm just going to have that map channel turned off. Ambient occlusion, and that'll do it for now. So let's go ahead and just close this settings, and let's go back over here to our main input. So at the very top you can see here where we're able to change our resolution. So in this case we'll work with 1024. We have our random seed values, and then we also have our main input. So again, if I needed to select an input, I can just simply drag and drop that here into the UI, or I can click this button and just browse to my hard drive to find what I need. Now we also have this feature, so if I click this button right next to the main input, we have the image rescale options. So if you were working with an image that's non-square, so typically with Bitmap2Material you're working with, power of 2 square images like 1024 by 1024 or so. But in this case I can actually choose to keep the aspect ratio, so if I'm wanting to work with an image that's not square, so it's non-square, I can do that as well, and I can set up some source image cropping and just some kind of pre-filtering before I actually start to have Bitmap2Material generate all the maps for me. So the first thing we're going to take a look at here underneath this global setting as we start to kind of build up this material is I want to bring your attention to this method setting. So what's new in Bitmap2Material is this new slope-based method. So what this method does, and that's why we actually have our height map here, it's a specific method for being able to derive height information based off images that have direct lighting. So it's really good for something like, say, where this rock, in this particular image you can see that we have some very prominent directional lighting within this image. So if you have an image that doesn't have directional lighting, what we can do is go back to our method and we'll change this to luminance based. So this is the method that has been available to us in previous versions of Bitmap2Material. So for this image we're going to keep this on slope based, and what we want to do next is set the light angle. So notice, or keep your eye here on our height. So if I'm taking a look at this image, you can see what just based off where the shadows are falling across this, that the light source is basically coming from this direction and it's casting, and we can see that we have some nice hard shadows to kind of give us that direction. So as I start to change my light angle, I can actually derive a better height information off this. So what you would want to do is set your slope base and then go ahead and make sure that you have your light angle set. So now that we have that in place, if I wanted to make this a tileable image, I could do that very easily by just coming over to our Make It Tile section. So in this case, I might want to do that. So here within Bitmap2Material 3, we have some new settings. So this very first option here, which I'm not even going to try to pronounce this name, but just know that the first option is basically, I'll call that our legacy option, or what has always been available to us in Bitmap2Material. But we now have a few new options. So we have linear, linear X, and linear Y. So this allows us to create a tileable image if we have something that's a very specific pattern. So say for instance you have an image that's like a brick wall, or something has very straight line type patterns. Using the tiling method for linear or linear X and Y would be very, very good for that. In this case though, I'm actually going to use the random setting. So what random's going to do is basically just take a few different chunks and it's going to kind of paste it all across the image, and it's going to blur in the actual seams. And then I can come down to the random angle variation, and I can change this to get, a different variation here within this. Also notice that as I start to change this value, not only is it working across our base color, but also our normal, or excuse me, our height map as well, and our normal. So here we're looking at our normal output. I go ahead and kind of change my angle variation, and you can see that I can adjust that across multiple maps. We also have the ability to work with our tiling transition. So this is going to basically be like a feather control here, so for the actual seams that are getting placed. So if you look really closely as I start to change this value here in the base, you can see where I'm starting to just kind of adjust or basically just kind of clamp in that feathering that's taking place for where those seams are getting placed. So in this case, I think what I'll do is just go ahead and just keep this at random. I'm just going to pull my tiling variation just kind of maybe all the way to 0 for now. And what we'll do is we'll just kind of keep this like this for our tiling. So here we've gone and we've set our slope base, we've set some tiling, and now we're actually going to move down to our actual diffuse base color. So I'm going to go ahead and just drop this, this rollout down, and we're going to take a look at some of the settings that we have. So the idea behind this is that we want to create a PBR material for this. So with this, we want to make sure that we create a very, or a correct albedo texture. And we can do that very easily here in Bitmap2Material by using our light cancellation. So right now, light cancellation is 0. What we can see here in our base color is that we got some very, very dark shadows, especially around here where you can see our directional lighting is taking place. So right around the edges of these rocks and things like that. So we have some very dark values that we want to remove from this base color. So we can do that with our light cancellation. So as I start to just kind of change our light cancellation, now as soon as I click that button, notice that a whole new set of controls drop down with me, or drop down for this actual command. So we have light cancellation. As soon as we start to activate that, we get things like our shadow cancel, the ability to work with our shadow saturation, highlight cancel, and so on. So what we're going to do now is just look at our light cancellation, and I'm just going to go ahead and just pull in some of this value here. And as I start to do this, you can see that we start to just pull that lighting information out. So the next thing I want to do is probably take a look at this coefficient for the shadow cancel. So maybe I'll increase this just a little bit here. Another thing that is really going to help with this image, which is coming down towards the bottom where you see the AO cancellation. So here what I'm going to do is just start to just pull in my AO cancellation, and you can see that this really helps to pull that lighting information out of that base color and create that appropriate albedo texture for us. So just looking at this a little bit more, maybe I'll just decrease this just a little bit. And one of the things that can kind of happen when you're working with something like this algorithm to remove this lighting is we start to, I guess in a sense, blur out some of our diffuse detail. So we also have control to be able to kind of bring that detail information back. So now that we have this in place, we have a really nice albedo texture. In this case, I'm going to go up one level here to our relief and just kind of just bring your attention to the ability to have full control over the relief that's being created, whether through our height map that we see here or our normal. So we have our control over low, mid, and high frequencies and so on. In this case, I'm just going to come over here to my normal intensity and just kind of crank this up just a little bit here. Now, something else I'm going to do is come over here to my 3D view, and I'm going to click the materials drop down. And if I move over here to default and over to one more section here to shader, you can see that I have several shaders. You do want to make sure that you're on the physically based shader. Now if you're working with spec gloss, you would obviously use the spec gloss shader. So in this case, I have physically based is activated. I'm then going to come up and click the edit button. Now if you click the edit button and you don't see anything as what's happened here, what I'm going to do is just come over here to the edge of the 3D view and just drag out, and now you can see that I have that window. So what this is allowing me to do is just get to the properties of my shader. So what I want to do is go over to my relief amount, and I'm actually going to pull in some relief information. So as you can see, as I start to increase this amount, we're starting to have relief information show to us here in the 3D view. And so once I am kind of done with these shader settings, I can just come back over to the edge of this window, just left click, and I'll just drag to kind of close it out of the way. So now you can see that I'm introduced a little bit more information here into our scene that we can work with, so we can better gauge how our height is going to be working for us. So our next section here, we're going to move down to our roughness, our glossiness settings. So we have lots of control over the micro surface here. So let's just kind of go and find where that map is. So here's our glossiness output. and here's our roughness. And so with this, we have the ability to just change the overall roughness value. So as you can see, as I start to increase this here, we're starting to get more rough. So you can see the values are a bit brighter, and we could decrease this, and then here you can also see in our 3D view how that's actually affecting the lighting in the scene here. So let me just kind of change my directional light just a little bit. Now I'm actually doing this by holding down Shift, left click in the viewport, and I can actually just rotate my main directional light here in the scene. So let's go back to our roughness value for these rocks. In this case, I don't want those to be as shiny as they are, so let's add a bit more roughness to this. So I'm just going to keep increasing this value until I get this. Now with this was kind of like our main roughness value. We also have the ability to vary that value through our curves. So it's like using a curves control. So you can see that I can start to get more fine-tuned adjustments to this as I start to work through this setting here. So the last thing we'll cover in this example is we'll just close up our roughness. We'll come back over here to our grunge, and we can actually enable a grunge map, so we can feed this as an image input, or we could just turn this on to utilize the grunge maps that are available to us here just in Bitmap2Material. So from our grunge choice, we have a set of 15 grunge maps that we can work with. So for instance, I'll just pick one here, such as 3. Now if you don't see any changes at first, there'll be some settings that we have to fix. So here you can see that we have rollouts for the blending mode. So instead of add sub, I might change this to multiply. And then for the base color opacity, I'll just kind of dial in this here. So what you can see is that I have control for the maps that I'm going to be working with. So here you can see that I've introduced a little bit of grunge to my base opacity. So for our normal, and I can also do that as well for the opacity for the normal map. In our case here, I'm actually looking at our roughness. So let's go through and go into the opacity here for our roughness glossiness, and let's dial this in as well. So what's really interesting about this, as you can see, is that we can supply some grunge information here. Let's actually change this to different ones. You can see we can quickly just kind of run through some of these guys to see some examples. Let's just grab hold of possibly, I think 7 is a good one. So here we'll use this one. Let's go ahead and just increase our contrast on this guy just a little bit. So what this does is just kind of further help to take an input image that you have, kind of break it up with a little bit of noise here. Our grunge adaptive shape, what this setting does is, like right now, if you kind of look at this, it looks like we just had a layer of dirt and we just kind of multiplied it over top. But we do have some really nice height information that we've derived from this image. So I can come over to my grunge shape adaptive, and I can actually pull in this value here, kind of set this all the way up to 1, and what it's going to do, it's going to conform the shape of this, possibly if we take this down to this setting here where we just look at these streaks here. So if we take a look at our adaptive shape and we pull this guy down, the streaks are more straight, and then if we pull this guy all the way up, we can actually start to have these streaks or this grunge kind of conform to the actual shapes that are derived from the height information. So you can go through on an individual channel basis, as you see here, whether it be rough gloss or height normal, and we can actually adjust how this dirt is affecting these particular channels here. And so again, it's just a quick way to introduce a little bit of further randomization to the materials that you're generating. So now we're going to take a look at a different example where we have a dielectric kind of concrete material here, and we also have a metal material, or somewhat metal, because we have a lot of dirt and rust and things like that. So we're going to kind of look at being able to work with a variation of these two materials. So the first thing we're going to do is let's make sure that we go to our outputs, and let's make sure that we have a metallic channel. So we need to come over to our metallic, and we're going to enable that. So let's go to global here. Here's our slope based. Let's go ahead and drop over to our map here, height. So in this case, slope based was on by default. Not a lot of directional lighting in this information, or excuse me, in this image. So I'm going to keep this based on luminance, and you can see where that actually changed the height information that's being generated. So I want to keep that. No tiling here, so we're finished in that case. Let's come over to our relief here in our normal intensity. I'll just increase this a little bit. We can actually view our normal map as we work. So here's an example if I wanted to work with the relief pinch. As I start to increase this control, you can see that as soon as I start to enable this, my radius then becomes available to me as well. So here we just have our normal map set for us for now. And now let's go ahead and take a look at our base color. So here we have all of our settings here. I want to take a look at the about working at this actual base color for this guy. So I am going to need to pull in some light cancellation to this. So I'm just going to kind of increase this value just a bit here, and I'm taking a look at my base color as I start to work with this setting here. So we're just kind of trying to just remove a little bit of the lighting. Now in this case we have some very dark areas here, like these holes, and these are going to be kind of cavity areas. Also a lot of kind of the dirt that's building up around these areas here as well. So those areas are going to stay fairly dark, but a proper albedo or base color map, we want to make sure that we don't have values that are very dark or that fall within. We want to make sure our values fall within a certain range. So what I'm going to do is just pull in my AO cancellation just a bit, because I want to lift these real dark values here. And I can also then kind of move or play around with my radius. So again, the idea is I'm just trying to use these settings to derive a proper albedo map for this. So in this case, I think we kind of have fixed this base color enough. So now let's come over and take a look at our rough glossiness. So what I'm going to do is just go through here and just find that particular output. Here's our roughness. So this is kind of the roughness map that we have. I'll tell you what, I think I actually want to work with our metallic first before we do any roughness. So you'll notice that I click the metallic output and it's pure black. So that's not good. We need some metallic information. So now we're going to come over to our metallic specular controls. So in our case, we're actually thinking of this in terms of metallic because we're using the metal rough workflow, as indicated again by the shader that I'm using. So notice I'm on physically based. So what we're going to do here is first we're going to set our method. So from main input, or we can also use the metallic input. Now the metallic input, if we actually come back all the way to the top here, since we enabled the metallic channel, notice this says optional, so it's one of those optional channels. So metallic, height, some of these channels that we enable, we can actually, and by height I mean like a secondary, like if we had like a secondary normal map or something that we wanted to actually blend here in our relief, we could do that. However, we have this metallic optional. So say you have an actual mask that you created that's basically going to mask the areas, or you have this from some other means, you can actually input this if you want to. So you can use an actual metal mask input. If you don't have that, you can use the controls that we have here to help derive that from the source image. And that's what we're going to do for this demonstration. So metallic creation method from main input, we're going to make sure that we have from main input selected. Now for the diffuse keying type, we have a couple options. We have luminance, chrominance, RGB. Let's go with RGB. And now we have a keying color. So what we want to do is we could actually just open up our color picker and we can kind of just manually pick a value. It might be good to just kind of start with the picker, so I'll go ahead and just click pick, and then I'll just pick a value from here. So what I've done is just kind of sampled just one of the values here for the a metal area, or what's close as it can be to a raw metal area for this. And so I've established a diffuse keying color. So once you have that, we can then come over here. Let me just close the color picker. We can then come over to our range, and we can start to actually just increase our range. So as you see, as I start to just kind of move my range slider, we're now starting to get some metallic mask here, or some information in our metallic mask. And so I'm just going to pull this up. I want to make sure that it doesn't spill over into our concrete areas or anything. So this is something that you can go through and get a lot of different fine-tune control. Here for our settings, this is basically like the softness. So what I'm going to do is just increase a little bit of softness to this. And then we have a metal minimum value. So if we turn this up, in our case, this isn't going to help us, but what's happening here is as I start to increase this value, notice that we're starting to go from black and we're adding metal. So we're basically saying, this, if anything, this area needs to have at least this, this value of metal. But we don't want that, so I'm just going to bring that up. But in this particular case, we need to keep that set to 0 because we really just want to focus or isolate what we're trying to have Bitmap2Material derive just the metal from this plate. Metallic dirt is nice, so what we can do is we can actually, if you have a lot of areas like in this particular example, this is metal, but it's actually painted metal, so you wouldn't really think of this as raw metal anyways. We have rust, dirt, all kinds of stuff over top of this guy. So what we can do with this is start to just increase some of the dirt to this here as well. So we can just kind of pull this value up, and it's going to kind of just utilize some of that from the main input image to kind of break up this mask here just a bit. Okay, so now that we've kind of gone through and just set kind of this area here of what we want to work with, we're now going to, now that we have this mask, we can now go in and just take a look here. Let's just kind of move our light around and we can kind of see where this is helping us. Now what we need to do though is really start to go in and tweak our roughness. So let's go now to our roughness, and I'll click our roughness channel, and you can see that we're fairly rough or uniformly everywhere. So we have several settings that we kind of covered in the first section. Roughness value. So let's go ahead and just give ourselves maybe around a 0.6 roughness value, because I'm really thinking in terms of this concrete here. And so I'm just again holding down Shift, left click, just kind of moving the light here in the scene a little bit so I can get a little better view of what I'm working with. Let's go ahead and just increase this just a bit. Now we do have our metal mask, and we want to be able to take this metal into consideration. So we're going to come over to our rough. We're going to look at our metal roughness influence. This is here because we have the metallic channel enabled. So what I'm going to do is just start to drop this guy down a bit, and as you can see, as I start to tell the metal roughness influence, if we start to just pull this slider in, we're starting to remove some of the rough value for these metal areas. And so I'll just go a little extreme with it here so we can really see what this looks like in the viewport. But now, as I start to move my light around, you can see that we have a different roughness value for the metal than we do in our actual kind of concrete area. So I think just right before we close this out, I'm just going to make a few small adjustments. So if we go back to metal, really what we're thinking about this in terms of this particular asset that we're working with is this is a metal, but it's painted, there's rust, there's dirt. So a lot of these areas that I'm indicating as white as pure metal is probably incorrect. So what I'm going to do in this case is just go back to my range, and I'm actually going to pull this down quite a bit. And what I'm going to do is just try to take my mask, or what I'm thinking of, I'm taking my mask and just thinking about areas of this that have maybe been chipped away and are truly revealing kind of raw metal type areas. And then I'm going to grab my softness here, and I'm going to pull this up so we can really feather this just a bit more. So now that we have this in place, another thing I just kind of want to demonstrate now that we actually have a metal map is we could come back over here to our base color, and we could start to actually work with this metal color replacement in our base. So here, let's just say that these are areas that we are indicating as pure metal, and we take a look at this, and some of these metal reflectance values here in our base color are actually pretty dark. So we're not getting true correct results. So what I want to do in this case is take my metal color replacement, and I'm actually going to pick a value. So this would be something probably close to like a real world measured value for metal reflectance. Here I'm just going to kind of eyeball it, so I'll go with something like maybe like this here. And then what I can do is I can actually start to dial this or actually add this reflectance value back to the base color by using this intensity slider here. So as I start to kind of pull this slider up, based off this metal map, what we're doing, and as I start to just pull this in just a bit, you can really kind of see it. I'll tell you, it'd probably be better if I zoom this guy in a bit here. And let me just try to find this area. Okay, so some of these areas here that I'm trying to indicate as more of an actual metal based off this metal map. So I'm going to pull these guys in here, and now I'm actually using this to replace this metal reflectance color with what I've indicated here, and I'm kind of overriding that. So again, we've got the control to be able to do that. So now in our view, we get something that's probably a bit more physically accurate in terms of the actual type of metal material that we're looking at here within this. So here, I think I'll go again back to my shader, and we'll pull this guy out. I'll increase my relief just a bit, and also, again, let's go back to our relief and our normal intensity. And we'll crank this guy up. And then so at this point we'll end up having the images that we want to create, our PBR base maps. So then once we have everything set, we would just go to export our bitmaps. Then we have our output sections here, and we can choose what outputs we want to work with. So say like we're actually outputting to something like say Unreal, base, rough, metal. We just turn off all the channels that we don't want to work with. We can set the format that we want to save these guys in, pick the folder that we want to work with, and hit export, and then Bitmap2Material will batch export all of the channels depending on what I had selected here. So that is going to cover this tutorial on how to use B2M3. So as you can see, B2M has a very strong focus on creating physically based content. We have the ability to work with the actual metal and rough maps. We have the ability to either supply a metal mask input or try to derive that metal mask input from the base or the diffuse input image that we're using. So you have a lot of control to be able to run through and actually generate the types of maps you want, which makes Bitmap2Material 3 a very powerful tool for quickly creating PBR maps for your projects.